All right, everyone, welcome to the Friday market wrap up, where every time this week, a little bit before market close, about 2 hours now, I just go through the weekly charts, figure out what happened this week, what I think could happen into next week, try to get some sort of understanding of what's going in the market. As always, on the weekend, I will then send over, once all my data is calculated, to StatsEdge Pro members, all of the picks for next week based off all the algorithms, some good trades this week, some building up some holdings myself personally, and I'll show you guys why I've been doing that on our trend following names, and just looking overall to see potentially what I think I should be looking at from these algorithms going forward. Because that's the main reason I do this kind of longer term scanning is when it comes to my trading, it's pretty simple, all right? On the weekend, I run the systems, I put those into our Discord alert bot, and I just wait. I wait for the prices from the algorithms to get hit, and then I'll take a trade after that. Now, why I want to favor maybe one trade versus another has to do with what I think of the overall market. So this exercise of me scanning through everything still is really, really helpful even as a systematic trader because, if I like biotechs and then I see a biotech name come through, I'm going to be more interested in taking it than solar, for example, if I don't like that name. So again, if you're interested, come check it out. StatsEdgeTrading.com, or if you're seeing this on YouTube, I have members now turned on. You can click on that there, and then there'll just be a member only video where I go over the top names that I like, and then everything with the entries and exits and all of that will be put in the description below. Now, let's pop into it. As always, we're going to start with Bitcoin. Talked about this last week, talked with this cup and handle for actual years now, 2, 3 years, and finally broke out. We had a little breakout, a retest, and then this thing's just been rocketing here ever since. Now, for me personally, I sold a chunk as we failed around 95, 94, $95,000. I got it out a little bit lower, I think 91 or 92. Not all of it, but a lot. And the reason for that is just everybody I have heard says, I am going to get out of Bitcoin when it hits 100,000. So in my head, I'm like, okay, if the whole world is selling at 100,000, I'm okay selling at 90,000. Now, doesn't mean I'm done with Bitcoin forever. I think this is the absolute top and it will never go any higher and blah, blah, blah. Move on. I just think that there's some overhead resistance. Had a really big move. I was talking about how I bought this down here in 52 and then I added a little bit when we broke out around 70. That puts me at, I don't less than a double, but not quite half. I don't know, 60, 70% return in just a matter of weeks. So I'm, in my mind, foolish not to take some of that off. We'll see if we come back down, if we build another base, if we have some sort of pullback or another pattern that sets up that's going to push us higher. I'm certainly going to be interested in that. Now, Ethereum, right? I just want to point out this is why I haven't touched this name. If I was ever looking to short crypto, if I thought that wall at 100,000 at Bitcoin was going to be big enough, I'm going to short something like Ethereum because this thing just can't get going at all. And this is why I've been looking at Bitcoin and sticking to Bitcoin because the relative strength of Bitcoin has been just immense compared to everything else. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Also, gold. Gold is getting very interesting to me as it's pulling back into this area right here. And that's also an anchored VWAP from this prior high. So this is the high that we broke out of. We're coming back into it. We're down 5, 6 days in a row. We're pulling into this. So on Mondays, make sure you're signing up, you're subscribing wherever you're seeing this. You're going to statsedgetrading.com and at least signing up for the free email list there because I generally do a video a day where I talk about different parts of the market. On Mondays, I cover Forex and crypto. So I'm going to be interested in, I think, getting into some gold next week. I put that in the Forex section because I think it's basically a currency. Moves like one anyway. So I'm going to take a look at that a little bit more detail on Monday. So definitely come and check that out. Now let's take a look at the SPY. Right, massive move last week after the election. Everything was sorted. Down move this week right into this prior high. That was really, really important to come back into this zone right here. Now, that's normal. That's, I think what we should expect. We're going to come back into this zone. We're going to maybe flush out some weak hands, look to push higher after that. That could potentially happen. Unless if we don't break this zone down here, which was this prior high back in this area, and then the support back in this area right here, I'm not too worried about it. It's just something that was up and is now pulling back, right? I don't think there's anything crazy about that at all. So this is why I've been talking about how I have been deploying things from a trend following standpoint in names that are more breaking out. I have kind of backed off a little bit of the pullback in the mean reversion algorithm, although I've taken a couple of those. But I'm very interested in the trend following names because anything that's holding up very well in a market like this, where we're down 4 or 5 days in a row into a support zone, well, anything that's breaking out from a trend following perspective, if I'm right and we find our footing here and then start to move higher, well, then I've already found the relatively strong names by looking at the names that have that strength when it comes from our trend following algorithm. So I'm going to be very, very excited next week or this weekend. So tonight, when I run this data and I send that out to subscribers, because it's going to tell me these are names that on the weekly chart are looking really strong and moving higher on the week, with the market moving down on the week. Again, I think this will be a good time to maybe get involved in some of those names. QQQs, just a little bit worse on the pullback, a little bit higher beta there. This is really waiting the Qs until NVIDIA. NVIDIA is such a large part of the Qs. It's going to be waiting until NVIDIA reports, which is sometime next week. It's Monday or Tuesday or something like that. IWM coming back down to this area of support right here for the small caps. I think that's a good area to potentially grab a pickup here on the small caps if we come back down to this particular zone and we can find some support right here. That's something I'm going to watch as well. Quickly from the currency front, I noticed this dollar yen play. This has been grinding up for a long period of time. This is when the Japanese bank got involved in trying to defend their currency, and ever since then has been grinding higher. Like it hasn't been working because the dollar's been moving higher essentially. However, right, on the weekly chart, looks like a pretty nasty topping tail in here where it pushed up and now it may close flat-ish on the week after looking really, really strong earlier. And then on the daily chart, you can see today with this bearish engulfing candle, this might be time to take a shot to the short side, see if this potential trend of, we have a push down and then a push back up, and then to see if this trend continues lower. That's something that I'm interested in keeping an eye on. Same with Aussie yen. Aussie yen didn't have nearly as much of the lift because it didn't have that dollar associated with it that's ripping, and this looks like it's rolling over as well. So next week I'm going to be interested in shorting that as well. I have Dogecoin in here just because I wanted to talk a little bit about how things are definitely getting frothy when you have Dogecoin ripping on some speculation or theory or something that is going to be part of the U.S. government. I think it might be time to say, okay, things are getting a little bit wild. If you have profits, it might be time to take some of those profits on some things. It's what I've been doing on anything that's overextended. I've been locking in those profits a little bit so that, again, like I mentioned, this week when the trend following algorithm is run, because the market is down, I'm able to say, okay, these are the names that weren't down, and if the market recovers and it hits our trend following target to enter, then that's what I want to trade. So that's what I'm just an example of things are getting a little bit too nuts when dog coins are ripping this bad. Uh, Uranium is something to watch. It's getting very tight here. This is what Brian Shannon called an anchored VWAP pinch. Essentially, we have an anchored VWAP from the bottom that's acting as support and an anchored VWAP from the top that's acting as resistance. And you can see prices pinching between those. Could be a way just to show that buyers and sellers are fighting. Big institutions, there's someone filling a buy order at a VWAP, there's someone else doing a sell order at a VWAP. Those institutions are battling back and forth, and it just creates this tightening. And we know from the market that expansion leads to contraction, contraction leads to expansion, vice versa, right? That's just kind of the way it goes. So this expansion uranium, if it resolves higher, then it may be time to look at some of those small nuclear reactor guys again, the SMRs and NNEs and even just some regular names like CCJ, or just take a look at uranium as a whole. So I'm going to watch this. Looked great earlier in the day, sold off a little bit. And we go into the weekly chart, you can see big push up and then just some consolidation here for about 2 to 3 weeks now. Semiconductors are falling here a little bit. And I just wanted to note that, right? We have, if we look even at the Qs, right, and just take this chart, take a second, look at it. Then we look at semiconductors. You can see the relative weakness in semiconductors. This is just showing us that there's a little bit of weakness under the hood, and the fact that the Qs are holding up means there's some rotation into other sectors, which is perfectly fine. It's kind of what we want to see in bull markets. But if that is going to continue, then I need to find better where that rotation is happening and be able to put my money in there. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to be sticking with some of these semis. I own things like Nvidia and all that from a rotational model. That gets updated once a month, and I just kind of follow that faithfully regardless. But yeah, this rotation is certainly happening. Now, this semiconductor index, if you want to take a bet one way or another, for me, it's right. Nvidia earning is going to do everything. This is going to gap up 5%. It's going to gap down 5%, just all depending on what Nvidia does during its earnings. Last ETF, before we talk a little bit about my discretionary, I always try to give out one discretionary idea I'm watching in the next week. And the reason I left this for last was FXI. So this massive push in FXI had everybody in the world watching it. Now we're down 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 weeks in a row, right back to this breakout point right here after about a 6-week kind of push down. So what I'm watching for next week, you could just play the FXI, or I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but BABA. Because same kind of pattern, right? Big push up and then comes back down to this zone right here with an 88.50 here and an 88.50 about there. So if we start to get some lift in this next week, if I see some green candles or some bottoming tails, or some evidence that buyers are going to support this zone right here on BABA, then I think that's going to be something that I'm interested in taking, because everybody I think that I've heard of is just been waiting for that chance. They missed the initial rip in China. They're looking to get back. Bob is just one of the biggest, best known names out there. So again, if I can get some sort of buying evidence in this zone for a discretionary trade, which I try to take 1 or 2 a week, I'm just going to take that shot right there. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for tuning in. As always, if you want more of this content, you want to make sure you're getting emailed this, go to statsedgetrading.com, check that out. Also, if you want to uh, try StatsEdge Pro, where algorithm spits out 30 names, I kind of review the top 10, send a video for that I like. Our Discord bot will ping every name. This name has triggered at this price from this algorithm. You can bring it up, decide if you want to trade or not. I'm not going to tell you to buy or sell. Obviously, I can't do that. But starting with a place from a statistical edge and then adding your own trading discretion to it, believe me, it helps out so much, as opposed to just buying a stock because you like a pattern. If you have a base of, hey, this has a 56% win rate across the 40 years that I've tested it, and it will make roughly this much money when it's right and lose this much when it's wrong. Having those base stats of understanding help out so much. And then again, all I do all week is I wait for an alert to come through. I bring it up usually on like a 30-minute chart or so, wait for a couple 30-minute candles to go by. If I like the trade, I punch in and away we go. So if you want to give it a try, come on over to statsedgetrading.com and give that a shot. I appreciate all the support there, and I will talk to you guys next week.